So today's gonna be a little bit different than all the other days when we're working on the car. So I wanna talk about my 3 laws of working on the car. Now, the reason why this video is coming out and we're talking about something a little bit different is I have a lot of projects going on and I'm stuck on quite a few of them. Either I'm waiting for parts, things are broken. I have the power steering pulled from the 1969 Mustang. I have a snowmobile where I can't get the flywheel off of the crankshaft. I've ordered some custom parts for the 69 Mustangs, the rear panel in there, something I'm working to make it easier to install and stay in place. Now my air compressor setup is complete, but the sandblasting setup that I have, it just isn't working out of the box. There's a lot of problems with it that need to get fixed. When I bought it, it's not the best design and I'm having a lot of issues. So I'm remedying those myself. Now, if any of these projects that I just talked about are interesting to you, make sure you subscribe to this channel and follow along as these videos come out. So these 3 laws are things that I think through every time I start a new project. You know, I'm starting to think through kind of cost, time, complexity, how I'm gonna get it done. So these 3 laws are gonna be the rules that I follow when I'm working through a project. And hopefully they are something that is very familiar with you, or there's something that you could use thinking about going forward. Now, the last one kind of has to do with completing projects. We'll talk about that one. Make sure you stick around to hear about it. All right, so each one of these laws I'm going to go through, and I'm going to go through with a few examples of where I followed it and where it's seen on my channel. So let's go ahead, let's just jump right into it. Now, law number 1 is every project is going to take at least 1.5 to 2 times the amount of time that you originally planned for it. When you start out and you work on a project, especially if you're doing something completely custom, like a kit car or you're working on something old, what I find is something always breaks or something that you purchased is not manufactured correctly. It's something that you unexpect happens. Now, here's a few examples from this channel. The map light that I went to install in my 1969 Mustang, the part that I got was poorly manufactured and didn't work. The wiring on it was completely bad. You know, an example of something that's breaking when I went and kind of worked on it is the Audi wheel bearings recently. You know, everything was so seized in there that not only did I have to spend a lot of time to get it out, but I also had to cut a bunch of parts apart to get everything apart. When I was working on the snowmobile, some of the parts that I've got, you know, some of the big bolts that I purchased for to hold the skis on, the bolts were actually not threaded, so I couldn't use them. And then looking at a lot of the previous owners' work on it just wasn't up to my par, so I had to go and redo a lot of work. Now, another reason that my projects or your project might take twice the time is, you know, just in general, they don't go as planned. So example on what I'm working on now for the snowmobile, I'm trying to take a flywheel off a crankshaft. I can't get it off. I've broken numerous tools trying to get it off. I've left it out in the freezing cold. I brought it inside. I hit it with heat. And I ended up breaking my harmonic balancer puller trying to get it out. So no matter what I do, that's been delaying me at least another week on getting that project complete. When I did my tow hooks on my F-150, you know, it looked like an easy project to do where you just take the plastic out or the rubber out and then put the tow hooks on. It was not easy. It's not easy to get back together. The plastic's brittle, it's hard. You can't actually get them out without destroying them. Or at least I found for my project the way I did it. So it caused the project to go from me saying it's going to take 2 hours to do to being a 4 to 6 hour project. And then one of the other big reason why, you know, projects take twice or even 3 times as long is because you don't have all the parts that you need to finish it. You always start with the right amount of parts that you need, but when you get to the point where you're putting everything together, you're taking things apart, you find more things broken, you know, there is just, you need to buy more parts to go forward. A good example of that on this channel is when I'm working on my power steering pumps, which so you can see one right here. You know, I'm planning on taking them. I need to sandblast all the cans down and clean everything up. I bought the sandblaster a few weeks ago, actually probably about a month and a half ago. And I haven't been able to get it working because a lot of the parts that came with it just aren't great. You know, a lot of air leaking. I'm missing some plugs for it. The instructions weren't great with it. So just like that new tool purchase threw a lot of work up in the air and it's causing me to delay a lot of the other projects that I'm working on. And then when I'm looking at the kit car, you always need to buy more parts for that because, you're building something completely custom yourself. And when you take things apart, that's when you really get to see what you need. So you end up taking it apart, looking at what you need, ordering the parts, moving on to the next step. Then you end up going to the next step, you see what you need, you order the parts, go again. Now, lots of great examples of all this on this channel. And some of the reasons why my videos get delayed a little bit is just because the amount of projects that I have going on, and I found what works best for me is to have multiple projects going on at once. So that if one project gets backed up, I always have another one going on that I can skip and work to. But right now I'm waiting on 3 to 4 projects. So rule number 2 for projects is to do with budgeting and how much you spend on projects. I always start looking at kind of what the budget's going to cost for these projects that I'm going to do. I always look at essentially what I think it's going to cost, and then I look at where I end up, and it's always like 1.5x to 2x the total cost. Now, there's a lot of good reasons for that. Part of it is if you start by buying parts and tools that aren't as high of quality, things are going to break. You need to spend a lot more time to get them to work. Spend time to get them to work, maybe you need to buy more tools, you need to buy new bolts, you need to buy new air hoses, as I'm learning recently. Good example of this is that sandblast cabinet that I am putting together. The hose that came with it is hard plastic. Not ideal for trying to get something not to leak on, so not only do I need to replace that, but there was no bulkhead fitting with it, there was no plug for the sandblast, for the material in the bottom of it, so I needed to purchase those. So while all those are coming in now, it just causes more cost and more expense to get everything working right. Now, the second thing that really drives a lot of this cost is you find more parts broken as you take it apart. Now, a good example of this, and it's probably something a lot of you have seen as well, it's when I was doing my front brakes on my truck, I ended up having the caliper bolt or the caliper pin be frozen in the front bracket. And when that happens, you can either try to get it out with heat, you can drill it out, but either way you end up with a damaged bracket. For me, what I ended up doing is I ended up actually just replacing the bracket. So you go from a few $100 project to adding another $50 to $100 on top of it. It starts adding up. So it's all these little things that you find during the way that are extra things that are broken that you need to replace that end up costing a lot more money. And then the last thing that causes projects to cost a lot more money, it's, tools, parts, everything break. Now, a good example is taking apart the snowmobile engine. I've actually broken some harmonic balancer pullers. This one used to be straight. It is no longer straight. So a lot of things like this that happen, that tool, I spent $80 on it. So I need to probably replace it with another one and then add more heat, hit it with a hammer, see if I can get it out. But a lot of projects, a lot of additional costs, they just keep adding up. Now, one of the most important laws, rules, whatever you want to call it, is finding the right motivation to get projects done. A lot of people end up starting projects and they end up getting to a certain point. They don't end up finishing them. They look and say, wow, this is such a big project, probably not gonna, it's gonna take hundreds of hours, or even it's gonna take tens of hours. I'm not gonna spend the time to get it done. Now, I've spent a lot of time in management, and when I think one of the best articles that I will link down below is from the Harvard Business Review, which is on finding small wins in projects. So from me, that's kind of the way that I look at all of my projects and the way that I pull everything together. Essentially what it does is, to keep motivation high and to keep spirits high, you really want to find small wins as you're putting together your car that keep you moving. Now, the article really calls out the importance of finding small wins as you're building your project, as you're doing innovation, to keep yourself or others motivated. So when I look at my projects, there are some key milestones that I try to hit for no matter what project it is. A good example of the GTM is, there are some really good milestones of, hey, the computer is powering up. Hey, the engine is firing and the car is running. The body is on the car. The doors are on the car. So I set up these small wins through the progress of all these projects to get myself excited and to make sure that these projects get complete. Another example is how I'm working on my power steering pump right now on that 1969 Mustang behind me. As I'm going through it, I don't know what I'm going to find, so I've broken the project up into multiple days. So for this project, one day is taking the power steering pumps out and apart. The next day is going to be cleaning them, making sure everything is okay with them. Then after that, the next project's going to be taking the power steering piston or ram, the cylinder out of the car, and replacing that. So I like to break them up into these small projects that, at the end of the day, even if you're spending an hour or 2 hours on them, even if you're only spending 30 minutes on them per day, at least you're making progress. And it feels good to know that you're going on to your next step. Another way to get the motivation to get these projects done is really to set an entire day and have someone here to help you and work on the vehicles with you to hold you accountable to get projects done. Now, I've done this a few times on the GTM where we've spent pretty much an entire day working through the engine. Actually, we spent an entire weekend trying to get the engine running, and we weren't going to finish a project. My friend wasn't going to fly home till we got it running. So for that, I think that's another way to do it that has worked well for me. Now, me being on YouTube, one of the other drivers of motivation on it are, I have to have a video out every week for everyone to see because I like sharing a lot of the projects that I'm doing. And because of that, it really drives me needing to complete projects in a good amount of time. That's taken a lot of time for me to figure out how to get the right cadence in with work, with family, and to make sure that I get everything down here done. But I'm finally getting back in my stride, getting these projects up and released. So those are my 3 laws for working on projects. Law rule 1, it's going to take you 1.5 to 2 times the amount of time to get a project done. Law 2, it's going to cost 1.5 to 2 times the total cost to get the project done. And then law 3, make sure you set up small wins for yourself throughout the project so that you feel like you're making progress and you do make progress. Thanks for tuning in this week on Smackey's Garage. I'll see you next time.